Hi, I'm Jayhub and this is Hyujin, and we're running Unit 2 from last year, and we're quite interested in like the form of architecture in physical ways, and we try to find out like some form itself, physical form, and the rules behind those kind of architecture physicality. So what we're trying to find out was like from last year, we're trying to focus on the shape to propose a mega structure. A research project was based on like unbuilt project. And from this year, like we thought like we wanted to focus on the more like sequence or like composition or layout of the architecture itself, and trying to setting a new rule for the new typology. And this this is like famous novel by Park Tae-won, and this novel is about like the the novel itself is following the sequence of the main characters, and behind the scene and behind the letters there is a like architecture devices controlling the whole sequence. And for example, like when the main character is trying to go out, the corridor was like too narrow and there was a like middle gate. So that's why how this novel can start. As a same gesture, we tried to research some Korean film. So we originally picked 30 films to make and let each student pick one. And important criteria when we pick films in the first place was that they should effectively show the cross-section of Korean society and rituals explicitly or implicitly. And spaces and sequence of space should play a key role in the narrative. We deliberately dropped films which are too famous, such as Parasite or Squid Game, since they have already researched by many, but also since it is more likely for us to be preoccupied. And for the midterm, we made a kind of booklet, so I hope everyone got it. And the presentation will follow this order as well, so you can watch it as a like reference. And all the students redrew the space of the film and then interpret the sequence of the main character at there. And look, we were trying to looking for like architecture device was like controlling the whole story. And the interesting point we find out was like in the film all the like spaces are fragmented and is seen by the like this 2D screen. So when we redraw the plan or find out how the spaces look like, it's already starting point of design, because like we need to reinterpret the space into like student perspective of view. So let's start. And these are the drawing image of all the students, because we asked the students to draw the one single drawing and the one perspective image for everyone. And these are the perspective image of the students. So let's start from Lydia.
So unexpected encounters, exploring unexpected social encounters in the Korean apartment. Informing the project, I studied the key architectural devices used in the Korean film JSA, directed by Park Chan-wook. The film explores the forbidden friendship between two North and South Korean soldiers. The most interesting device I thought was the bridge separating the North and South. The bridge goes from performing as a device to facilitate connection and friendship to performing as a dividing threshold once polarizing political and social ideologies are once again realized. I thought this idea of political polarization is extremely relevant in our current world. We've seen this through protests, riots, and wars globally. In South Korea, political polarization has been exacerbated by the pandemic, leadership crisis, foreign policy, and looming security threats, as well as recession fears and inflation, increasing living pressures. These issues together, as well as increased social isolation as a result of the pandemic and our technological world all contribute to increased polarizing political opinions and divisions in our society. I wanted to explore how architecture can facilitate these political and social discussions by challenging the layout of the typical Korean corridor apartment building, which are typically monotonous, restrict movement, and allow for limited social interaction and encounters, where many dwellers do not know who their neighbors are. To inform my project, I explored the traditional bathhouse architecture as a form of community space, encouraging social interaction. This typology is now slowly being displaced by private bathrooms. I wanted to further explore this form of social space that isn't consumption-based, but rather can become integrated as part of one with rituals. The once restrictive and antisocial Korean corridor apartment layout becomes a series of unexpected social encounters. All private bathrooms from apartments are removed and replaced with communal bathhouse shared between each floor and connecting through a narrow bridge like the ones in JSA. The layout of each apartment goes from more private encounters with private bedrooms sharing a balcony to more public encounters with every 2 apartments sharing a kitchen, living and dining space divided by a kitchen bench. Each floor has a large communal terrace and corridor space, as well as communal bathhouse with toilet, showers, and a communal bath, allowing for unexpected encounters. And these are some unexpected encounter moments. So the apartment, kitchen, bath, and toilet. Thank you.
So I'll do it. We'll go all the way again, and then.
Yeah, because of family, so like
Yeah.
please,
Right.
if there is some tips to help, comment, you have to write down.
Yeah.
Sorry for that. Eric.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Eric, and my proposal is an artist retreat inspired by Ilmari. Ilmari is a movie about loneliness and profound connection through space and time, illustrated by the architecture and the location of the house. The protagonists are separated by time, but not by space, making their lives intertwined. It shows the duality of having a woman and a man inhabiting the same house. The Ilmari house creates a path from the coast via a bridge that connects the 2 volumes of the house and ends with a concrete stair that leads into the ocean. The ritual of the inhabitants of Ilmari is sharing their daily lives through letters to each other. They share their daily struggles and feelings as they send a letter when they want to connect with someone. The house is fundamentally a lonely house. The sequence diagram depicts the sequential use of the different parts of the house and the protagonist's connection to each other through the postbox. The bottom shows every time the man uses an element of the house, and the top shows every time the woman uses an element of the house. As seen in the bottom, the man who lives in the house throughout the movie is more solid, while the top line is more fragmented, showing the woman mainly visiting the postbox to connect with the man. The vertical dotted line shows every instance of letters sent back and forth. The Ilmari house. The house is made up of distinct elements working as different architectural narrative devices. The idea is to take and rearrange these elements to propose an artist retreat where an artist can enjoy their own lake house in isolation while giving the opportunity to talk to others through letters. The proposed site is on the coast of Jeju Island. The houses are randomly scattered. The proposal consists of triple-heighted studio rooms, which with a connecting bridge at the top of the room, and a post box for each house to message each other. The houses are randomly scattered, and the walkway that connects certain houses, certain places are more intimately connected than others. And the internal connection to the neighboring houses if you choose to connect to another house. More background research about Korean culture and housing can be seen in the book that we produced as a studio as well. Thank you.
Point of view, air pollution is getting a little too serious. A project originally inspired by the Korean film Barking Dogs Never Bite. Barking Dogs Never Bite is set in a typical Korean apartment block following the lives and routinely habits of several ordinary Korean people. Disappearance and murder of several dogs around the block gives rise to a series of pursuits that enrich the storyline of the film. These pursuits mostly occur along the perimeter corridors of the apartment block, such as the ones seen here. The openings and blockages that inform the result of the pursuits is formed by the combination of rotating doors and narrow corridors, which was the key architectural device used throughout the film that I was intrigued to explore further for my proposal. Another aspect that I wanted to explore, or rather address, through my proposal is the severe issue that South Korea is facing at the moment with air pollution. The average PM 2.5 concentration in South Korea is 65, which is 3.8 times the World Health Organization's annual air quality guideline value, positioning South Korea as the 52nd worst air polluted country in the world. And Seoul is further ranked South Korea's worst city in terms of air pollution. So I further looked into the patterns of higher and lower levels of air pollution in Seoul throughout the day to inform the proposal for a new Korean apartment design. I decided to explore the idea of these sort of automated dynamic partitions that rotate throughout the day to accommodate an ordinary Korean's daily rituals, such as the ones that I observed throughout the film. The other aim of the proposal is to reimagine the open-close architectural movement taken from the film, to use it as a way of controlling the amount of polluted air that filters into the apartment throughout the day, as well as the lives that people lead inside these apartments. The dynamic partitions rotate every certain hours of the day. During the morning, when the air is generally less polluted, the bedrooms and private living areas are fully ventilated. Then during breakfast hours, the kitchen and shared living room areas open up. As the day goes on, depending on meal times, the kitchen area opens up and closes itself back up. Okay. But most of the apartment is pretty closed off given during these hours as air pollution reaches the highest recorded values of the day. During the final hours of the day, as air pollution starts to die down, the partitions start to open up again to let the apartment breathe cleaner air before closing back up to offer privacy at night. Overall, in response to the rising severe issues as a result of air pollution in South Korea, the proposal aims to essentially question whether architecture might have the ability to encourage people to follow a healthy daily routine while simultaneously improving the indoor air quality of their home environment. Thank you.
Thank you for very concise and very nice presentation. And I have just question for kind of process. And from the movie, you pick the scenario and sequence and draw plan rather than sequence. Plan implies some kind of architectural forms, I think. So by doing that, why didn't you pick the sequence rather than just plan and form from the movie? Because I think you guys already have a kind of, how can I say, a hypothetical architectural form from the movie. and then you brought those form into the Korean any issues in order to produce the form. So by doing that, I think some quality of sequence of the movie a little bit disappear. So is it intention or so is it intention for the in order to produce the form or some kind of other thought for doing that? So that's the question.
So the sequence we were telling through the research was not a storyline or not based on like social or political some issues in the movie. What we want to trying to find out in the sequence from the film was like a small moment that architecture are changing some rules. Like for example, in like Alba's case, in the movie film, could you show the image that the moment of the film when there was a chasing between dogs and the main characters was blocked because of the some like coincident door was opened, so like door itself is acting as a like obstacle for it. So Alba found out that because of those kind of like elements of the narrow corridor or door is like making the story going on because the door couldn't like capture it. So this kind of small architecture device was what we were trying to find out. And what we believed through this research was like, how about bring this like device to make a new sequence for fit on the Korean some like social or political issues like
Exactly. Like, I think in midterm we all like really went in depth as to what was the sequence and what was the that inspired us, like as Jay was saying, like, and it wasn't only just so we like looked at both the typology of the architecture that was being used in the film, but also how the sequences were happening in that typology.
Okay, cool. Well, we also believe that, in the barking dog never bite, instance is, that is that very small moment film which he was interested in. But we also believe that even though it's very small incident, we believe that there is a Korean ritual, the Korean society in the very moment. Thank you. Basically, so film, any kind of film usually deal with the time sequence anyway, and that as I can see, all this kind of diagram is kind of linear diagram. Something is kind of curved, like a angled, but anyway, most of things kind of linear diagram, and then get that kind of timely sequence translate into the architecture to an individual movement, I guess. So three of you guys kind of provide space for individual person, and then by that, the moving around that person, that person has different sequence or something like that. So how you guys, maybe I already mentioned that thing, how you guys can, what's your main strategy to translate this kind of time sequence into this kind of spatial sequence or spatial quality or something like that? Because we architects, it depends, but we are not really focused on time sequence that much. We are more like focused on just space itself, not in time sometimes, but you translate that in sequence, right? Kind of spatial sequence. So how you can, like, can you explain a little more about that kind of transition? Because that's always my question about this kind of film, because a lot of architects always deal with this kind of film idea, but kind of impossible to how can we translate time into the space or something like that. So what's your opinion?
Well, I think in my personal projects, it's I took more the more obvious route of the fact that like my partitions are generally moving in time, but maybe you guys had a very different approach.
So for my project, it was a little bit different. So actually, it's got two people living in the same house, but then the post box is kind of a time travel machine. So it's kind of a broken time sequence, and actually they're separated by 2 years, which I reflected that that's actually connected to kind of the common leasing system in Korea, a leasing system, which is not really used outside of Korea. And for my proposal, I didn't really go that much into that, but was the idea to having half of the retreats would be female, half of them will be male specific, where the tenancy agreement would be 6 months, but it would not be January to June for every person, but it would be the women would have it 3 months off centered from the men. So when you connect with someone, then maybe that person would only stay there 3 more months because then that tenancy agreement would quit. That was kind of my interpretation of how the time sequence works in the movie, how that reflects on the Korean architecture and policy making, how you rent, and how that also would relate to my proposal.
I guess for me, in JSA, the main protagonist was constantly like traversing across this bridge from one pavilion to the other, and that was sort of a common sequence throughout the film. So I wanted to replicate that sort of idea of crossing into another space that's more social in my proposal, like going into the bathhouse and from the apartment.
Would add a little bit more that what I was also intrigued, especially by Eric's project, was that in terms of those temporal issue, in his film, female and male, and they contact each other even though they have, for example, like one person is from like contemporary and one person is living in the contemporary time, and if he draws the diagram, there's this line of contemporary time and the state of the 70s, for example. And in the film, those two stations coexist at the same time. So, for example, this diagram, for example, like on the top, it's a line of like 1970s, for example. And below, there's this contemporary time. And if you draw the diagram, even though it looks linear, we believe that those two different spaces coexist at the same time. So that is one way to interpret the temporal issue that you mentioned.
That's also like maybe I think that's also kind of informed well the idea that we have all of things that social housing, which is
essentially the idea that there's two, like, which is in my film as well, all the characters are living their separate lives, but they're all living together. And even like when you, like with Lydia's example as well, like she's got the kitchen and both families or both residents are using the same kitchen. But there's two completely different temporal stories going on, and they're both leading their own like separate lives, but using the same space at the same time.
I can. Thank you very much for the presentation. I actually loved every single project. I think the first one was also clever in a way that it criticizes and also proposed some kind of alternativity of the collective utilization. But by using bridge as a mechanism and technique to dislocate components, like huge components of like essential elements of apartments or the Koji one, and then actually allocate it to one shared space. And I think really good reading for you could be Maria Divichi's text on Koji, and her proposal is actually very different terms of the form of the collectivization. However, what I thought is a bit of a missed opportunity. I really liked it, but it's I think this diagram is actually really amazing that you did present. That what happens in the bridge, or like in different moments. And actually, I think that needed to be highlighted in the proposal much more than the, the banal spaces that actually been, connected from one point to another. So I think actually like the close-up moment, and like, it's a general comment for all of you, I think, and the whole is that I think a lot of people are commenting on the film sequence versus the architecture sequence that's being newly proposed and reframed. I think it would be super useful to actually, juxtapose from one scene, existing scene to your proposal scene in like really similar angle, and then completely new perspective that we're actually proposing, because I think very helpful. But like, I kind of agree and disagree with Jaewon's initial comments about the, like whether the sequences are important. I mean, yes, but at the same time, through your abstraction level with the choices of diagonalizing the features and getting rid of big chunks of the reality, it's already like really telling in terms of the focus that you want to get into anyway. So I think for the sequence making, I don't know whether something to be kept. I think it can be potentially discarded. And I love the third one because of the fact that we can already directly relate our social issues so closely to the film, because the film's message already was telling us that the suspense only comes because of the typologization and the severe division and the idea of privacy, which actually comes from the Latin etymology privare. It's to deprive. Actually, the privatization comes from deprive. And I think it's very clever to use this Duchamp like door, but obviously it's not. But it would have been amazing because actually it gives you a choice of either, if you go to the plan, either we want to actually connect ourselves to other as a extended corridor form, or we want to compartmentalize completely. Like there's no in between, like your proposal. So I think having a bit braver choices on this kind of decision making could be actually even more provocative than the proposal. But anyway, I still think all the projects are really amazing. And I mean Eric's proposal, I mean it's already been commented about the time related issue and the social issues of the very Korean specific Chondae culture. I think if you have tackled on that a bit more, it could have much strong, but it's already really interesting diagram that surpasses all the time. So really well done. Thank you very much. Okay.
So hi everyone, I'm Shiming. So next please. Can you hear me? So in the second half of the 20th century, Korea began to develop rapidly. Mental health problems are growing in South Korea. Globally, mental health is one of the most neglected and less discussed areas in the healthcare. Next please. In the 2017 South Korea, nearly 1 in 4 individuals suffer from a mental disorder. 95% of the South Korea reports being straddled with struggling the former page, please. No, the second page. Yeah. 95% of South Korean reports being straddled with staggering rates of depression among the elderly. The result is an alarming national epidemic that has only worsened annually for the past 20 years. Every day, nearly 40 South Koreans commit suicide. The driver of the problems are many points to the increasingly competitive and stressful culture surrounding work, life, and family in South Korea. Next, please. Besides that, the amount of exercise of Korean people has also decreased due to the impact of epidemic. As social distance began in society, indoor and outdoor public facility for sports and recreational activities such as the gym, pool, and playground are closed. The decrease of the physical activity may increase cardiometabolic risks and potentially exacerbate underlying chronic disease. Next, please. As discussed in my film, the sequences of space are in a conversation of layering. Next, please. From the temple in the lake to the step, then to the deck, and crossing the lake by the boat to the gate, and stepping on the land, the functionality of each space is very clear and different, but inseparable. Next, please. Inspired by the film sequences, in my proposal, I incorporate spaces in social housing where residents can share the space that improve mental health and enhance physical activity. Next, please. So from the plan, walking from the unit's layer to the inner layer is an indoor river with slowly flowing water. People can row a boat on it or take a swim to release the pressure. The layer of the water is a dividing line which clearly separates the functionality of spaces. The outer side for the activity space and co-living, and the inner layer for the mental curving. Walking through the bridge is a vibrant public garden space on the deck for resting. And then the most inner inside layer is meditation pavilion that have two parts. The outer part is a semi-open meditation space which residents can self-cultivate. The innermost is to provide people with the quietest meditation space where they can be alone or want more privacy. Next, please. In order to integrate and implement sports into daily life, on the periphery of the units, the concept of bringing the race track at home provides a spacious space between the other sides of the wall of the living room to the outer wall of the building. The sequences of this space from left-hand side to right-hand side also implements the architectural composition of the temple in the film, which was in the sequences of the inner space of the temple to a step and then to the deck. This composition of space is designed in the sequences to convenience the resident straight away to take more physical activities such as cycling, sports, and fitness in their daily life without traveling inconvenience or other reasons, and ensure the fresh air coming from the window at the external wall when taking activities. Thank you.
Hi everyone. I'll start my presentation. My name is Changhyun Yang. Memories of Murder is a movie about detectives trying to catch a serial killer, which is based on a true story. Throughout the whole movie, the train ruins the evidence and kills the only witness, while more and more people were getting killed. I found the train and the railway as the main architectural device and drew an imaginary master plan of the town it shows in the movie. And this is a diagram of how the murder cases are keep going on while the evidence disappear along the railway and how everything was trapped in the loop. Thinking about violence towards the minorities and how it is repeated itself made me think about no kid zone in Korea. More and more restaurants and cafes do not allow customers who bring the children. It is controversy at the moment whether it is an abhorrence or not. I wanted to suggest a new type of no kid zone, and in this apartment, rooms for adults and kids are separated by the corridor. Outer space is no kid zone, and inner space is only kid zone. For the adults, they have an individual terrace for each unit, and kids will share not only their connected terrace, but also their rooms as a playing area. With the void in the middle, kids will hang out with others who live in different floors as well. And this is how the indoor would look like in standing in the corridor. Thank you for listening.
Hi, my name is Sumin, and I'm going to tell you about my project. Lady Bongjongs is a film about the framed woman named Lee Geum-ja plans to murder the true criminal who treats her as her daughter. I paid close attention to her way to go her room, where she has to climb many stairs and triangular stairs. Especially the triangular staircase is the architectural device for symbolizing Geum-ja's secret for planning to murder and hiding her daughter at her room. So I thought it can be connected with now Korean social phenomenon. Nowadays, lots of young Koreans thought they don't want and need to marry or live someone together. Because of this, new words combined with 혼 means alone appeared. For example, 혼 combined with 밥 means meal, so 혼밥. 술 means drink, so 혼술. 영 means movie, so 혼영. Day means have meals alone, drink alone, watching movie alone. This is the articles about more and more Korean live alone because of COVID-19 or their personality and more. So most commercial system develop strategies to target people living alone. Also, many broadcast programs are starting to pay attention to the lives of people living alone. So I want to make the facility for people doing something alone. They don't want to be a spectacle and want to enjoy their life without others' view. The triangular staircase from Lady Bongjongs was brought to my design. The triangular staircase, which symbolizes her mystery and secrets in the movie, are suitable for protecting the privacy of those who do things alone. In a room divided into three, people can do what they want in there, such as eating alone, watching movie alone, or drink alone without being disturbed by anyone. Each individual has 3 rooms with different personalities and their own space on one floor. The triangular staircase respects the privacy of each occupant. The triangular shape minimizes encounter and invasion from each other, and the rooms formed along the shape of the stairs contain occupants' personality. Also, soaring towers on a narrow plot of land can provide space for individuals with a small footprint in Seoul City. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jimin. The movie I chose was The Host. First of all, I will briefly introduce the midterm presentation again. I compared the space of the monster and the main character Gangdu. Also, I announced the sequence of the monster and Hyunsuk, who is kidnapped by monster, especially in the lower space of the bridge at the Han River. Among them, the key elements I used in the final design is the monster functioned as a space in Hyunsuk's sequence. To transform these elements architecturally, this image came to mind. These are related to the space of transcend human scale, moving itself. And linking this to the delivery system of Korea, in Korea there is an active delivery culture that brings goods and food to the front of the house. In particular, the demand for delivery has increased since COVID-19, and the types of deliveries are diversified. In addition, the era of home economics began after COVID. People began to consume at home what they usually did in outer space. Therefore, the house not only functioned for rest and sleep, but also functioned as a space where various productive activities take place. Under this background, I suggest delivering space beyond the existing delivery service. It can be possible to deliver spatial experience that cannot be delivered until now. As shown in the picture, the capsules are delivered along the rail installed on the outer wall of the apartment. I imagine that be installed in the existing apartment complex like this image. And this is the scene from from the outside when the delivered cashier attached at the veranda. Then the door of the cashier open, the floor deck come out, and then served stair or ladder to connect. As the capsule is attached to the apartment, the area and function of the house are expanded for various lifestyles. In other words, we can have one more option for location for doing hobby, leisure, work, education, or something. Let's see the interior space. The living room is expanded like this. Various experiences are possible in the delivered space. This drawing shows a situation where a clothing store capsule is attached and it enabled to do home shopping. In addition, you can imagine another various capsule spaces. You can enjoy luxury Michelin restaurant in pajamas, or you can also be delivered with fruits hanging from the tree from orchard capsules. Also, you can get together with your neighbor in the capsule or enjoy leisure activities such as camping or VR gaming or something. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I think overall, I appreciate about the studio is in some ways, you guys are, I mean, it reminded me a lot of the monasteries, like, Inaki Abalos did a whole study about monasteries and the daily ritual, and monasteries are basically a representation of the monastic life. So in some ways, I think that the unit.
Maybe hard for them to answer this question. Yeah, because and from last year, our unit is doing cyclist project because of like first one was like what you want to focus is more like zeitgeist of this Korean situation, like as more in like big scale view. And also the main problem was like because of the time period of this workshop, it's just a 10 days. So like to make it like efficient, and also we're kind of like pushing for the production as well. So making the same style for the drawing and render. So I think it's more about like without like cyclists and then just showing the like more possibilities to. And what I'm thinking is like if project is successful is we don't need to make it like agreement from the others. We want to make it some like just discussion between the other together. If it can make some discussions, I think that is kind of like successful for the project.
Thank you. Thank you for presentation. I think compared to first three projects, those four projects is much more translate previous the form of a map, whatever from this map from the movie directly just converted to the form rather than the first three projects. So I think that's cool in order to achieve some kind of certain sequences for the final proposal, I think. But it would be a little bit more, I think, twist or further developed, by looking at the issues you found from the city, from the Korea. They're gonna be much more appropriate for the contemporary issue, I think, rather than just directly making the form, I think. So that's one thing I think wanna say now. But I think also the final view could be, I think, related to the change, so make a setup view related to the maybe from the movie, I think, like a similar types of view or types of perspective view, rather than just making those kind of section, I think. So it's much more interesting to look at, and it make more kind of whole setting or kind of process you want to show from the last maybe view, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, because the map of Parimental, which has a lot of limitations, and you mark humans are marked as limitations, and in some ways, I was wondering how maybe that could have also been, translated into like maybe not representing humans as humans, but we have objects here, right? So, in some ways, I think sequence movement and the way people are represented could have been represented with the absence of human. I don't know what that is, but I just thought it was interesting representational choice of not to have humans, but then that made me wonder how then can we
show these kind of activities and movements without humans. So I mean, I don't know the answer to it, but maybe you guys can explore. I don't know, but it's curious.
I think those like I think human figure in the rendering, it has like two maybe or more goals like function. One can be it shows the fact that it shows the scale, and second one is it shows how people can actually occupy and use spaces. But we also think that those can be achieved through the furniture and other factors. And one maybe I should talk about. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel
Somehow, yeah. Yeah, I think somehow it's already stylized. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I studied film Shaking Tokyo in the movie, and I'm designing a co-living space this time. Next page, please. By developing the research project to a further stage, I looked at Korean social agendas, especially those related to the daily routines of Korean people. Since daily routine is what I focused on in my previous study of the movie, I found the social event Huishi very interesting and controversial. Next page, please. Huishi is the term for gathering of people for food and drink. It has become recognized as a subculture of organizations and business in Korean society. It has a very different reputation in between young generations and senior employers in Korea. Next page, please. The young workers see Huishi as an extension of working hours without getting paid. They believe that Huishi takes place of their personal time. However, senior workers believe that Huishi is a necessary social event as it will bring co-workers together and result in better relationships between them. Next page, please. To understand this topic better, I looked at the simple daily routine of a Korean employer. The person has very lack of time to sleep and he has to travel from place to place. Next, please. The four spaces are workplace, Huishi place, personal place, and traffic. Hence, the design solution is to first reduce the traffic time to a minimum, and second, allow Huishi to be held at a more flexible time frame. Next, please. In comparison with the Korean employer, main character in the film Shaking Tokyo is totally withdrawn from society. Next. He does everything in his house. He moves in between wardrobe, toilets, kitchen, next page, living room and entrance. Next, please. By comparing the two timelines, I found that the main character in Shaking Tokyo has a more chilled and relaxing daily routine, as he does everything in one place. Next. The design idea of the project is to design a building that involves three kinds of spaces: the personal space for employers, the working spaces, and the gathering spaces for Huishi. Next. Residences in this building would have the freedom to create their own workspaces and boundaries. They can choose whether if they wanted to have their personal spaces further away from working and gathering spaces, or if they want to get closer to their friends. The plan demonstrates this idea graphically. We have beds representing personal spaces, desk representing working spaces, and dining table representing Huishi spaces. All three kinds of spaces are placed randomly as residents could decide where to put them after they move in. Next. The first render image separates the spaces into three different colors: the pink color for personal spaces, mint color for working spaces, and yellow color for Huishi spaces. Next. And this render is to show the design idea from a closer perspective. So overall, the design of this project is to design a future co-living spaces that mix personal spaces, working spaces, and gathering spaces all together. Thank you. That is the end of my presentation.
I am Jin An from Unit 2, and I will start my presentation. This project began as research for scenes from the film Castaway on the Moon. This film shows the communication between the male protagonist, who is adrift on an uninhabited island, and the female protagonist, who lives only in a room. In this film, I interpreted the architectural device known as a bridge. The bridge represents a pivotal point in the lives of the two main characters. The bridge not only expresses an important message, but it also provides as an architectural device. This section depicts the island where the male protagonist has drifted, as well as the bridge over which the female protagonist chooses to communicate with the male protagonist. As seen in the section in plan view, the two main characters who are divided from each other communicate through a medium known as a bridge, utilizing indirect elements such as vision rather than direct communication. So this diagram is based on the film sequences that appear in the scene. So through research, I tried to make a new proposal by applying its architectural bridge to Seoul. These days, due to the density of buildings in contemporary Seoul, there is no greenery. According to the recent news, the amount of land available for green space is decreasing while the amount of land available for development, such as residential space, is increasing. Nature has lost its place as a result of these factors. As humans intervene directly in nature in the current situation, the disconnect between nature and human space became severe. So I would like to make a new architectural suggestion here. So everything I want to say is in this axonometric drawing. As seen in the film, one of the architectural elements of the bridge acts as a medium connecting two completely different spaces without physical touch. Then wouldn't it be possible to use bridges to connect different spaces, such as human and natural space? As the drawing shows, the space above the bridge is for people, while the space below is a jungle. A bridge connects the areas where people live, and there is a nature space which only can live beneath the bridge. Just as the two main characters in the film interacted on and under the bridge, this project aimed to propose a space where nature and humans can interact. And this is the render image, which reveals what I want to pursue through this project. A complete jungle exists between the areas where people live, and it serves as a bridge connecting two distinct areas. This bridge creates a space where humans do not directly intervene in nature and proposes a new communication space. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Huyang. At first, this image is Ali's Garden of Eden. It shows how the strong boundaries can be broken by a little architecture device, which is leather. I found that the high wall is surrounding his house, while there is only one entrance. The second, his house that is surrounded by dense trees, and his office which is buried underground and isn't easily seen by others. In the film, the garden represents Cheogyu Lee's lost use. Eun-gyo is interested by forbidden garden concealed from a wall outside a locked home. Eun-gyo crosses Lee's personal space without Lee's agreement using leather leaned against the wall outside the house. Although there are no flowers in his huge garden, but the garden he created in his universe which full of entities. The garden envisioned by Eun-gyo and Lee is beautiful. So dark border line is the boundary to protect the space. The dashed line means it is difficult to get to Lee's house. It attempted to express the emotional pulse of the key characters. Despite she is the only one who can overcome the barrier, the normal line means that the solid square in the middle of the diagram represents Lee's house, so she can go anywhere in his house using the stair and ladder. Just like Lee's house in the film, privatization is a powerful motion in Korea. Someone insists on unlocking closed private instance. The choice to open the private lanes raises the question of whether they will achieve their objective of shared utopia. So let me ask you a question. Should we have to open or break the wall? As for the social phenomena that restricts people from entering, one door is put in a high wall for privacy protection and the boundary defining private property. And I suggest a trail for the public in the private area, just like a path toward Lee. That only Eunggyo could go in the film. For homeowners, there is an other outdoor space inside the complex that looks like a garden in a movie. When facing the wall, people will be curious about the inside of the complex. It could lead to be disconnected world, but it's also potential to define a place like universe of Lee's fantasies for inhabitants. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hansop, and I'll start. We select a scene that could change the ending of the movie and took our architecture element from the scene. And the movie I chose is The Handmaiden. The Japanese colonial area become background of this movie. And the plot of this movie is the story of these three people, noble lady and handmaiden and above. I focus on the scene I focus on the scene that they communicate with each other through a small hole in the door between the lady's room and between the handmaid's room, because the feelings between the lady and the maid have changed, and then everything began to change. Yeah. First of all, I'll draw a drawing. The maid is sequenced to the door, and the main thing is I just focus on the sequence and delete the other things. And this is the noble ladies one, and they meet together. They meet in the middle, the small hole in the door. This is a diagram that visualizes the sequence to the little hole in the door where the maid and the lady communicated. The point on the right side is the starting point of the handmaiden, and the left one is the noble lady's one. I focus on the process in which two figures with many differences communicate through a small hole in the door. As COVID-19 started, people couldn't meet offline as well like before, and probability of depression have more than doubled. Also, generational conflicts are getting worse. These are problems caused by inability to communicate. I apply the sequence that we communicate through a small holes to these issues. I plan a domestic project that two different generations live in the one building, and the main method of the building is linear shape, because the line creates the boundary and the shape refers the conflict between two generations. Older generation enters the building through a core at the top, and the younger generation enters the building through a core at the bottom. These two generations that can never meet until they enter the room, but communication can be made through a hole in the living room. The people who live here sometimes share food each other and listen to each other. It's my render. The scene was meant to represent the home of an older generation in Korea, and just like entering a new world through a rabbit hole, I'm trying to create a scene and communicate with a new world through a hole in the house. The opposite side is the younger generation room. That's it. Okay.
Yeah, I can go. Thank you very much for the presentation. Really well done. I think if I go in order, I think the first project is actually making our contemporary condition very transparent through one plan. I think I read it as a marriage between the Bureau Landschaft and Archizum's No Stop City, which actually describes our current contemporary condition of work. There is no real distinction between the labor, work,
production, reproductive, leisure. They are all framed under the work. But actually, you know, that also gives us the opportunity to flip it, you know, that everything can be very pleasurable leisure moment. But we also have to be really aware of the contemporary tendency of these tech campuses, for example, that proliferates these, you know, constant production through leisure-like, you know, organization and fit out of the production space. So everything looks like an arcade or resting space, cafe, eating space, but they are all, you're constantly working within that environment. So I think I find that analogy very clever. And second project, I mean, so I'm a bit biased in a sense that I mean I love the you know this wild speculation of, you know, having jungle and almost like an island-like condition within the city. And actually, if we just extend whatever we have already, I think we can achieve this in a sense. So I think, again, you know, it's a really clever way of kind of framing our current condition. And if I move on to the last one, oh, sorry, it's not last one, it's the third one, sorry. The Eun-gyo film, this is really interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, there is this tendency of architecture education these days that like everyone is afraid of like having a giant wall, like building up a wall, dividing one space from another. And I mean, I love the wittiness of like using the social problem as a means to achieve this like a gigantic enclosure. And actually, if we think about garden as a, you know, typology, it comes from Hortus conclusus, which is an ideological enclosure. But you know, that was an ideological enclosure for a single mansion, but this time it's actually for a lot of people. And I really think that it helps us to rethink about the, you know, urban openness and general critique on very transparent space that's always being like surveilled and controlled. And, you know, to a degree, it builds up the social convention up to the highest level that we just cannot use the space at all unless it's walled. So I think it's really interesting to embrace this garden idea with a giant enclosure. So I mean, I really appreciate the wittiness of the project. And then the last project, the rabbit hole of the handmaiden. I think, you know, this is like a serious issue, but at the same time, it would be really nice if we can piggyback from the existing social movements that happens all over the world. I think there are a lot of countries that's who are already like adopting to have cross-generational living types. So like elderly community actually offering really cheap or no rental cost for the younger generation to actually, you know, look after them time to time. You know, so it is a real thing, and it is turning into you know, the new kind of anti-typological form. And this could be a really interesting, you know, typology to implement the actual social movement that happens outside of maybe Korean context, but soon it can be the reality of our own. I mean, not to solve the problems of these generational gap, but, you know, just to have another alternative options for, you know, living types. So I think it's really interesting in many ways. So yeah, really well done. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, I also appreciated the set of process. I'll give a more of a general comment. I think, you know, I think the method and provocation is very interesting, but I think we have to caution ourselves because in some ways, a lot of the provocations that happened during the modernist movement, you know, I feel like in some of the ways, what we're seeing, if you look at that axons, those ideas were byproducts of modernist movements, which in turn created this kind of disconnect and the disjunctions that we face today. And I think we have to be aware that sometimes what we imagine doesn't translate into what we want to become. And it's good to provocate, but as architects, we need to be more sensitive to what has happened. So Garden City, Corbu, Hilbersheimer, like we see that everywhere in Seoul, but that didn't fix anything, right? So I think sometimes when we do these larger projects, it's important to operate in kind of the smaller and then minute details of things. And I think those kind of the projects really spoke to me. I really liked the climate, the air pollution projects, or the sort of these drawings that deal with like sort of people's movements. And sometimes the translation I felt became a little bit too grand and a little bit too provocative, and actually just replicating the linear building, right? Like, so despite all the great work and the amazing thought propagation that you guys said, I think as architects, sometimes we have to look into our own steps and say, okay, some of this works, some of this didn't work, and we have to figure out what we can do as a part of the social fabric. But overall, like the last 4 projects also great representations, and the social issue I felt like were well kind of considered and valued. So I'm not saying that you guys are the modernists, but just to caution.
Especially the line drawings after this or before this. This looks really cool, and then kind of express how radical these projects are. It's just really nice looking diagram slash whatever the plan slash things. But especially this kind of the final 4 projects, I'm just not sure the films are really do something for these projects. It's really like a small portion of, you can just get kind of from anywhere, you can get kind of hole on the wall idea, not even from the handmade movie, or like let's make a really the vertical wall. You can get that kind of idea anywhere. So I'm just kind of curious about why you should really bring the film idea or those kind of concept, and at the same time that line drawings works really well and tell us really well about how the radical and provocative they are. But in this kind of, because the previous critique mentioned before, this kind of no human rendering with this kind of colorful and kind of, I don't know, it's kind of really like artificial looking and eye level rendering, like really pretty, no lines and kind of no light, some of them. So I just want to really know what the tutor's concept for this kind of 3D diagrammatic looking rendering. Why you guys are trying to push this kind of expression for the final result.
Let me answer for the first question.
But I prefer the line drawing. It's more like you can see the kind of variation of each project. But right now, everything kind of
Yeah. So for the first question, you're absolutely right that for some of the projects, film doesn't do much in the final project, but it was in fact initiated from the film, and even though they aren't lookalike, or even though they sometimes doesn't seem like they're connected, I think those juxtaposition of film and the project kind of make another narrative sometimes, like because for example, for Hyunsup's project, the last project, he studied handmaiden, and when we see the final image or plan, we will not be able to have any idea why this is connected with handmaiden, or if he doesn't explain it, nobody will catch that. But when we know the fact that it is initiated from the handmaiden, we can think both film and the project at the same time, and it will make another narrative, and make the project in different way. And maybe you can.
I think for the first question, I'm sure it's impossible to get this proposal without film research. I'm sure that because every project is really based on the film architecture device. We found it, and I still thinking like it doesn't need to be physically same or as a like as a look, because like all the like literatures or the order or whatever the rules they found it, and then it translate into architecture shape or form. I think that is still working, and also I believe I sometimes I was thinking that isn't it too straightforward? I thought it like that. I thought from the film is to going to project is almost like in one direction. And for the second question, as a like aesthetical ways, because like we are proposing a project without site or without any other materiality. We only want to focus on the shape and the order or some like sequence of or like layout. In that case, the aesthetical way it should be really well organized as well. What do you believe in that way? So for the like coloring thing is to show the like shape or the order itself, and without any material, without any other aspect, just to show match in the like same rule is to like empowering all those architecture idea into the one way. That is what we thought at the first time, and I'm still thinking it kind of worked well to show their ideas, and of course for the collection.
To be perfectly honest, it's kind of like a taboo to say about styles, um, like, but we do have styles, and like these are we are particularly influenced by those European architects, and some of the American architects like MOS or WOJR. We Yeah, there are like black and white renderings, there are photo collage, there are colorful renderings. There are a million ways to produce these images, but we chiefly wanted to make all these images look like.
That whole concept into one drawing and one collage image was like kind of task for us. So I think that's why this kind of thing kind of comes true. Because like to showing just in one image to express their whole idea, I think that was the goal for our unit. Drawing as well.
Yeah, I wanna maybe set some kind of conclusion for me. And I think for the drawing wise, I think those drawing are very effective. The first one, the perspective, very effective to me because it shows some kind of happenings or events out of objects and out of some kind of colors, etc. So with the people, I think so. In a way, I think it's working to me. So and other comments I wanna say, and whole project is quite well done in terms of some aim of the unit, I think. So in a way, our forms that you produce quite tackle the social agenda in terms of some perspectives. So in a way, it's very satisfying some workshop you've done. But I think all form are working as in terms of touching the agenda, but at the same time, it has kind of very too concise or some concise also, and it's too direct in a way. So in a way, I think all students maybe they need to have time later on. It is really good chance to develop later on, maybe in mind or by themselves to better some kind of more interesting form, I think. Well done.